The forest was silent, dark and cold. The wind whispered through the dead trees, carrying the smell of wet earth and something else, something strange. Jaron walked carefully, his boots crunching over broken twigs and dead leaves. He wasn't supposed to be this far from the settlement, but he had heard something, a sound like crying, and he couldn't ignore it. His flashlight flickered as he moved deeper. His heart beat faster, not from fear, but from something else. A strange feeling in his chest, like something was calling him. Then he saw it hidden under thick vines and moss. A cage. It was rusted, old and broken in some places, but still locked inside it. Curled up in the corner like a broken doll was a girl. She wasn't human. Her skin was a pale shade of lavender. Bruised and scratched, her body was thin, almost like she hadn't eaten in days. Her hair silver and messy hung over her face. She had no clothes, just a piece of dirty cloth barely covering her. She was shivering, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes closed. Jaron took a step closer. The cage groaned under his weight. The girl flinched, then slowly opened her eyes, big, bright eyes filled with fear and sadness. They locked onto his. She didn't move, didn't speak, but a single tear ran down her cheek. Jaron's heart broke. He knelt beside the cage, speaking softly, "Hey, it's okay, I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't answer, only stared at him. He saw the lock old but strong. He pulled out a small tool from his belt and began working on it. His hands were cold, but he didn't stop. The girl didn't move, not even when the lock clicked open. Slowly, carefully, he opened the door. The girl didn't run. She just looked at him like she didn't know what freedom meant. Jaron took off his jacket and held it out to her. "Here, take this." She looked at it, then at him. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it. She wrapped the jacket around her small body. Still shaking, Jaron offered his hand. "Can you walk?" No answer, but she tried to stand. Her legs wobbled. She almost fell. Jaron caught her gently, lifting her into his arms. She was so light, like a feather. As he carried her back through the forest, she didn't speak, didn't cry. She only held onto his shirt, her fingers cold and weak. Jaron felt anger rise in him. Who would do this to a girl? Who would lock her in a cage, naked and alone? She was just a child, or maybe a young teen. He couldn't tell with her alien features. But no one deserved this. Back at his cabin, he laid her on a soft blanket near the fire. He gave her warm soup, but she only stared at it. He turned around to give her space. She took a few small sips, quietly, like an animal used to being punished for eating. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat by the fire, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the flames. Jaron stayed close but didn't pressure her. He wanted to ask questions, but she was too fragile. Her eyes had seen too much. Outside, the wind howled louder. Something told Jaron this wasn't a simple rescue. This girl had a story, and it wasn't over yet. At midnight, she whispered something. Jaron turned to her, surprised. "What did you say?" She looked up, her voice soft like a ghost. "Don't take me back." Jaron shook his head. "I won't." She nodded slowly, pulled the jacket tighter, and closed her eyes for the first time. But even in sleep, her body didn't relax. Her face still looked scared, as if the cage was still around her. Jaron stayed awake, staring at the fire, listening to her breathe. He didn't know who she was, or why she was left like that. But he knew one thing. He had found her for a reason, and he wasn't going to let anyone put her back in a cage again. The next morning, soft light crept through the cabin window, touching the girl's face gently. Jaron was already awake, sitting nearby, watching over her like a quiet guardian. The fire had burned low during the night, but he hadn't dared leave her side. She stirred slowly, blinking against the light. For a moment, she looked peaceful, but as her eyes adjusted, panic returned. She pulled the jacket tight around her body and scooted backward against the wall, her breath fast and shallow. "It's okay," Jaron said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe here." She didn't answer. Her lips were dry, her face pale. Her eyes were still red from silent crying. Not the loud kind, but the kind that stays locked inside. Where it hurts the most, Jaren placed a small bowl of warm food beside her, a mix of rice and soft vegetables. Easy to eat. He didn't push it toward her, just left it there and stepped back. He knew enough not to act like her owner or her savior. Just someone who cared. She didn't touch the food. Not for a long time. She only sat there, knees pulled tight, head down. A tear slid down her cheek again, followed by another. She didn't even wipe them away. Jaren sat on the other side of the room, not watching her too closely. He worked on fixing an old communication device, but his mind was still with the girl. Every time the wind creaked the wood outside, she jumped a little, her body tensing like she expected someone to burst in and drag her away. Hours passed in silence. Then, when Jaren pretended not to look, she reached for the bowl. Her hands were shaking so badly that she nearly dropped it. She brought the spoon to her lips and sipped slowly, as if expecting it to be poisoned. Her eyes never left Jaren, as if waiting for him to change to become cruel. But he didn't. He stayed quiet, gave her space, and after finishing half the bowl, she set it down and looked at him properly for the first time, not with full trust, but something close confusion maybe, or curiosity. Jaren smiled gently. That's good. You need strength. She blinked slowly, then looked away, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. Her hair still covered part of her face, but he could see now how young she truly was. Maybe no older than 16, if she were human. Her arms were thin, her skin stretched too tight over bone. I don't know your name, Jaren said, keeping his voice calm, but I won't call you it or creature. You deserve more than that. No response. Not even a nod, just quiet tears again. Silent rivers down her cheeks. Later, Jaren placed a soft robe near her and turned around. You can change if you want. I won't look. He walked outside, giving her time. The wind was colder than before, clouds gathering above the trees. A storm might come tonight, but inside, the cabin was warm, and she had a fire and food, and someone who didn't treat her like an object. When he returned an hour later, she had changed into the robe. Still oversized for her small frame, but better than rags. She sat on the edge of the bed now, watching the fire, her eyes lost in the flames. Jaren sat beside the door, not too close, and asked gently, "Can you understand me?" She didn't nod or shake her head, just sat there. Then very slowly she lifted her hand and pointed to her throat. Her fingers moved like she was trying to explain, but no sound came out. You can't talk?" He guessed. Her eyes flicked toward him, then down. She pulled her knees to her chest again, curling up tight. Jaren felt something twist inside him. Whoever had locked her in that cage had not just hurt her body, they had taken her voice, maybe not her vocal cords, but her will to speak. He took a deep breath. "It's okay. You don't have to say anything. You don't owe me anything." She closed her eyes, tears rolling again. But for the first time her body didn't shake. She was still crying, but calmer, like something inside her had let go just a little. That night she slept again, this time curled under a blanket. Near the fire, Jaren stayed awake, sitting on the floor nearby, watching the flames dance, wondering who she was, what had happened to her, and how broken a world must be to treat someone like this. She didn't speak, but her silence said enough, and for now, Jaren didn't need words to understand. The wind outside howled against the old cabin walls, but inside, the air was warm and still. The girl, wrapped in Jaren's robe and covered in a soft blanket, lay near the fire, sleeping again, but not deeply. Her breathing was uneven, and sometimes she twitched like her dreams were filled with fear. Jaren sat nearby, fixing an old power cell by candlelight. He looked at her quietly, not with pity, but with worry. She still hadn't spoken a word, not even a whisper, but he was patient. He had lived alone for a long time. He understood silence. As he leaned over to stoke the fire, he noticed something on her neck. Her hair had fallen to the side, revealing a faint glow beneath her skin. At first he thought it was a trick of the light, but when he moved closer, he saw it clearly, a mark. It wasn't a bruise or a wound, it was too perfect. A circle with lines crossing through it, almost like a symbol, and it glowed faintly blue, pulsing with slow rhythm, like a heartbeat. He had seen markings before, tattoos, brandings, but nothing like this. Jaren didn't touch it, didn't want to startle her. But the symbol stirred a strange memory in his mind, something he had read long ago: secret programs, hidden colonies, rumors of engineered lives, created and discarded like broken machines. The girl shifted in her sleep, and her hand reached up to touch the mark unconsciously. Her fingers brushed against it lightly, and then she winced in pain. Her body curled tighter, as if even the memory of the mark brought back something terrible. Jaren leaned back, his jaw clenched. Whoever had done this to her had claimed her as property, not just caged her, but marked her, owned her, used her. The thought made his stomach turn. He got up and moved quietly to his old desk, pulling out a cracked datapad. He hadn't used it in years, but it still worked. He typed in what he could remember about neck symbols and glowing brands. The signal was weak, but a few old files still remained. Deep in the archives, one entry caught his eye. Experimental breeding projects, Biomark 8 class ID tags. The text was blurry, corrupted, but enough to read. Girls like her, non-human, genetically adjusted, were created for testing. Many were sold to private buyers before they ever learned to speak. Some were tagged with Biomark 8 South, a symbol used to track and control them. Jaren closed the pad slowly. His hands trembled with quiet anger. This girl was never meant to survive. She wasn't even meant to be found. Just another silent body in the system, forgotten in a cage. He heard her stir again and walked back to her side, kneeling carefully. She was awake now, eyes wide, staring at him with confusion, fear, and something else, shame. "It's okay," he said gently. "I saw the mark. You don't have to hide it." Her eyes filled with tears again, and she turned her head away, hugging the blanket tighter around herself. Jaren placed a hand on the floor beside her, not touching her, just close enough to feel real. "You were never supposed to be just a number," he said, voice low. "You're not a thing, you're not broken, and you're not going back." She didn't answer, but something in her body softened. Her shoulders lowered just a little. She didn't run, she didn't flinch, she just listened. Later, she sat up slowly and moved to the edge of the blanket. Her fingers touched the side of her neck, where the mark still glowed. For a moment, she looked at her hand like it didn't belong to her. Then she looked at Jaren. She didn't speak, but she reached out and gently placed her hand on his. Just for a second, her touch was cold, light as air. But it said what she couldn't. "Thank you, and maybe, please don't leave me." Jaren gave a small nod. "I won't." Outside, another drone buzzed past, too far to see them, but close enough to remind them the world hadn't forgotten her. Someone still wanted her back, not because they missed her, but because they owned her. Jaren turned off the light, just in case, pulled the curtains closed, and double-locked the door. He knew now he wasn't just hiding a girl. He was hiding a secret, and maybe the beginning of a war. That night, Jaren couldn't sleep, not even for a minute. The storm outside had passed, but inside the cabin, something heavier still filled the air. He sat near the table with his old datapad, light from the screen flickering over his face. The alien girl lay on the bed across the room, wrapped in his robe, eyes shut but not sleeping peacefully. The glowing mark on her neck had stopped pulsing now, but the memory of it stayed in Jaren's mind like a knife. He couldn't forget what he had read earlier, the files, the reports, the dark history behind girls like her. She was never meant to be free. She wasn't even meant to live. She was part of a forgotten program from the outer colonies, the kind of program no one ever talked about in public. The record said these girls were engineered companions, test subjects created in illegal labs, sold before they could speak. Some were designed to obey, others to be beautiful and silent. All were branded and thrown into black market trade routes like worthless property. Jaron leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes. "She's just a kid," he whispered to himself. "How could they?" A sudden soft noise pulled his attention, her voice, or something close to it. She was mumbling in her sleep, her head tossing side to side. Her hands gripped the blanket tightly, fingers curled like claws. She was having a nightmare. Jaron moved slowly to her side and sat down beside the bed. "Hey," he whispered. "It's okay, you're safe." She gasped awake, sitting up with a small cry, sweat on her forehead. Her eyes darted around the room in terror. But when they met his face, the panic faded just a little. She was still scared, but not of him. She didn't speak, of course, but she placed a trembling hand on her chest and breathed slowly, trying to calm herself. Her mouth opened as if to say something, but no sound came out, just air. "It's okay," Jaron said again. "You don't have to talk, just rest." She nodded slightly, then turned to stare into the fire, hugging her knees again. Her silence was heavy, but now Jaron understood it better. It wasn't just fear, it was survival. In the early morning, Jaron stepped outside for firewood. The cold air bit into his skin, and his thoughts wandered as he chopped the frozen logs. He knew he couldn't stay here forever. Someone would come looking for her. The drones passing nearby were a warning, and her mark was like a signal beacon to the people who had made her. He looked up at the sky, clouds hanging low over the trees. "They'll come for her," he muttered, "and they'll kill anyone who gets in their way." When he returned, the girl was awake and standing shakily near the window. The robe hung from her thin frame like it didn't belong to her, but she didn't seem to care. She was looking outside, watching the forest, maybe listening to the silence. "You all right?" Jaron asked. She turned to him and then slowly pointed at herself. Her finger hovered over her chest, then moved to her neck where the mark was. Then she tapped her head gently and shook it. Jaron watched her movements closely, trying to understand. "You're not like them," he guessed. "Not like the others they created." She nodded. "Did you escape?" he asked softly. A pause, then one nod. Jaron let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "So they don't know you're alive, not yet." The girl looked at him, her eyes deep and hollow but flickering. Now with something else, something small and fragile, hope. He stepped forward, but not too close. "Listen, I've seen what they do to people like you. They use you, break you, erase you. But you're not broken, you're still here." She raised her hand again and slowly traced a letter in the air. A, then another, V, then finally, a, ... Ava? Jaron whispered. She gave a tiny nod. Her name. She remembered her name. Jaron smiled gently. "That's a beautiful name, Ava." For the first time her lips curved. Not into a full smile, but something close, like her face had forgotten how to do it properly. Jaron turned away, hiding his eyes, because for a moment they burned with tears. He cleared his throat. "I have an old transport unit buried in the forest. Not far from here. We can dig it out, maybe get off this world before they find you." Ava's eyes widened. Her hands clutched the edge of the robe tightly. She didn't smile again, but she didn't cry either. She simply nodded. And for the first time since he found her in that cage, Jaron believed it. She might actually survive. The morning sky turned gray as clouds gathered thick above the forest. A cold wind moved through the trees, shaking their branches like warning fingers. Jaron stood outside the cabin with a small shovel in hand, breathing heavy. His boots were covered in mud, but he kept digging, uncovering something metal beneath the ground. Ava watched him from the doorway, wrapped tightly in the oversized robe. Her silver hair moved in the breeze, and her bare feet stayed inside, just touching the edge of the wooden floor. Her eyes held a quiet question, but she didn't ask. She never needed to. Jaron brushed away the last layer of dirt and stepped back. There it was, a small escape pod half buried, but still intact. He had crashed here in it years ago too. Damaged to fly, but maybe, just maybe, he could fix it now. I didn't think I'd ever need this again, he muttered, tapping the dusty hull. But if it works. We're getting out of here. Ava walked carefully to his side. Her gaze scanned the metal shell, confused, afraid, but also curious. Jaren opened the side hatch with a hiss, and dust sprayed into the air. The inside was cramped but clean. He climbed in first, testing the console. It sparked weakly, lights flickering like fireflies in the dark. It still has some power, he said with a surprised smile. We'll need a few days to patch the core, but it's possible, Ava nodded, her fingers brushing against the cold metal like she was touching something sacred, something that could mean freedom, but they didn't have days that night. As the wind howled louder and rain began to fall, something moved in the forest. Jaren had just returned to the cabin after gathering tools when he saw it, a flicker of red light through the trees. Slow, steady, scanning, a drone. But not a scout this time, a hunter. He shut the door quickly and locked it, grabbing his old blaster. From the corner, they found us, he whispered. Ava looked up sharply, eyes wide. Her hands began to shake, and she backed toward the shadows. No, Jaren said quickly. They haven't seen us yet. But we have to move, tomorrow morning. We finish the pod. We leave before they return. Ava pointed at the window, then her neck. Her meaning was clear. They were tracking her mark. Jaren nodded. I'll mask the signal. I've got an old disruptor chip in storage. They didn't sleep much that night. Ava sat curled near the fire, eyes open, watching the door as if something could break through at any moment. Jaren worked silently at the table, fingers fast and careful, fixing the chip, patching wires, checking every tool twice. Just before dawn, a sound cracked through the trees like metal scraping against stone. Jaren ran to the window and froze. His heart sank. A figure stood beyond the trees, not a drone. A person, tall, armored in black. Visor glowing red. A bounty hunter. Ava saw it too. She covered her mouth to muffle a sob. Backing away fast, her body shaking. Jaren grabbed the disruptor and pressed it against her neck, right over the mark. It blinked green. Signals masked, he said, but it won't hold forever. He handed her a small emergency pack blanket. Rations, small water capsule. Go to the pod, hide inside, wait for me. Ava shook her head violently, refusing to leave him behind, but he gave her a firm look. I'll draw him away, just stay hidden, if I don't come back in 1 hour. You launch that pod. She stared at him, eyes full of fear and tears. Then slowly, very slowly, she nodded. Jaren stepped outside with his weapon drawn and his heart beat loud in his ears. Rain fell harder now, soaking his jacket. The trees dripped with cold, and the hunter stood still, waiting like a shadow with a purpose. You're trespassing, Jaren called out. The hunter's voice came, low and mechanical. I smell the stolen asset. Return her now and you live. She's not property, Jaren growled. She's a person. The hunter raised his weapon, red light flickering through the mist. Then you die with her. Jaren ducked behind a tree as the first blast hit the ground near his feet. Mud flew in all directions. He returned fire, not to kill but to delay. To survive, to buy her enough time back at the pod. Ava closed the hatch and crouched inside, her body shaking. Lips pressed tight to hold in her cries. She stared at the console, then at the tiny launch button glowing blue beside her. She didn't want to leave, but she didn't want him to die because of her either. Outside, a second explosion lit up the forest. The world was burning again, and escape was no longer a choice, it was survival. The trees burned red beneath the flashing lights of plasma fire. Jaren darted between trunks, breath sharp in his chest. The bounty hunter moved like a shadow, silent but deadly. His shots were controlled. Precise meant not to scare, but to kill. Jaren's blaster was old, but it still sang through the air. He didn't aim to win. He only needed time, just enough for Ava to escape. But time was running out. Another blast hit a nearby tree, sending bark flying into Jaren's face. He stumbled, fell into the mud. His leg burned, grazed by the edge of the shot. He groaned, pushing himself up, limping now. He couldn't outrun the hunter. Not like this. Behind the smoke and rain, the armored figure stepped into view again, weapon raised, voice calm and cold. "You chose death, human," Jaren aimed. But his hand trembled. He knew he wouldn't fire in time. Then it happened, a sound sharp, raw, full of something ancient and terrifying cut through the storm. A scream, Ava's scream. It came from deep within the forest, rising like a wave of energy. The trees shook, the wind stopped, even the hunter froze. Visor flickering for a moment, confused by the sudden shift in the air, Jaren looked up through the smoke and saw her. Ava stood on the hill above them, robes soaked in rain, hair wild and glowing with light. Her eyes weren't just bright, they were burning. Her neck mark pulsed like a star, glowing gold now, not blue. She was barefoot, shivering but no longer afraid. The hunter turned, weapon moving toward her. Target reacquired. Before he could fire, Ava raised her hands and the world screamed back. A wave of energy exploded from her chest, not like a weapon, but like a scream turned physical. Trees bent, leaves flew. The hunter was thrown back like a rag doll, slamming into a boulder with a loud crack. Jaren covered his face as the force hit him too, but it didn't hurt. It passed through him like warmth, like light. His heart raced as he stared at her. Ava dropped to her knees, the glow fading. Her chest rose and fell quickly, and she looked around confused. Her hands trembled. She hadn't known she could do that. Not until now. Jaren limped toward her, dropping to his knees. "Ava," he breathed. Are you okay?" She looked up at him, face pale but eyes clear. Her lips moved, and for the first time, a real voice came out, not strong, but soft like morning rain. "You came back." Jaren blinked, shocked. "You can speak?" "I didn't remember," she said slowly, voice cracking. "But when he hurt you, I remembered everything." Tears filled her eyes and she grabbed his jacket, pulling herself into him. "I didn't want to lose you, not like the others." He held her tight, ignoring the pain in his leg. "You won't, I promise. You're not alone anymore." Behind them, the hunter groaned. His armor cracked, but he was still alive, barely. Jaren reached for his weapon, but Ava touched his hand. "No, let him go. I don't want to kill." Jaren hesitated, then nodded. Together, they turned back toward the hidden pod. The signal mask had burned out, but it didn't matter now. Everyone tracking her would know what she was, what she had become. Not just a creation, not a slave, but something more, something powerful. That night, as they sat inside the pod, Jaren worked on the launch system. Ava helped, still weak, but focused. Her voice was quiet but steady now, like it was coming back one word at a time. She told him pieces of her past memories she had locked away just to survive. She had been raised in a lab, taught not to speak, punished when she cried. Her name had been wiped from the system, but she had hidden it, buried deep inside, and now it had returned. Ava, not a weapon, not a product, just a girl. The pod hummed to life, lights blinking green across the console. Jaren smiled. "It's working. Just one more day, and we can launch." Ava leaned her head on his shoulder, her hand finding his. "Then let's fly far," she whispered. "Someplace where no one can cage me again." And in that quiet moment, filled with rain and firelight, Jaren didn't just hear her voice. He heard her heartbeat, alive, awake, free. The forest was quiet again, but not with peace, with warning. The storm had passed, but the damage remained. Trees stood broken, the ground was scorched, and the body of the bounty hunter lay still near the boulder, barely breathing. Ava had let him live, but his broken armor meant he wouldn't be chasing anyone anytime soon. Inside the hidden pod, Jaren tightened the last wire with shaking hands. The control lights turned green. The ship, small but strong, was ready. A full charge, sealed thrusters, flight system stable. It was old tech, but it would fly, far enough to escape tracking satellites and bounty routes. Ava stood near the hatch, her robe traded for one of Jaren's spare jumpsuits, still too big. For her, but clean and warm. Her silver hair was brushed now, pulled behind her ears. Her face no longer looked haunted, just tired and determined. "This is it," Jaren said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "One jump and we're off this planet." Ava stepped inside slowly, running her fingers over the inner walls of the pod. Her eyes flicked over the blinking lights, the soft hum of energy. She paused at the pilot seat, then sat in silence, looking at her reflection in the glass of the control screen. She didn't recognize that girl, not the one in the reflection, not yet. "Where should we go?" she asked softly. Jaren sat beside her, entering coordinates. "Far from the colonies. Off-grid sectors near the outer ring. I know someone who hides refugees. They'll help us disappear." Ava nodded slowly, but her fingers gripped the seat tightly. "If I stay hidden, they'll never find me again, right?" "They'll try," Jaren said truthfully. "But you're not a prisoner anymore. And you're not alone this time." She turned to him, her eyes bright with something that wasn't fear anymore, something closer to strength. "I don't want to just run forever," she whispered. "I want to live. I want to learn. I want to choose." Jaren nodded. "And you will, Ava, one step at a time." A loud hum shook the walls of the pod. The energy core finished its cycle. Lights across the control panel blinked green. The ship was ready. The world outside was not. Ava reached forward, hand hovering over the launch button. She hesitated, then pressed it. With a low rumble, the pod rose from the ground, dirt and leaves spinning into the air. Jaren's cabin shrank behind them. The forest below faded. The sky opened, stars appearing like thousands of eyes watching them rise. Inside the pod, Ava's breath caught as the planet fell behind. She'd never seen the stars this way, not from a cage, not through prison bars, but from a ship, beside someone who didn't own her, but chose to stay with her. As they entered the atmosphere, the warning signals in the console lit up. A message appeared across the screen in bold red text. "Bioasset. Detected tracking signal reacquired." Jaren cursed under his breath. "They must have locked onto the ship's signature. They know you're with me." Ava didn't panic this time. She placed her hand on the screen, then took a deep breath. "I can feel them," she whispered. "They're systems. The machines that watch." Jaren stared at her. "You can feel them?" She nodded. "It's part of the design. I wasn't just made to obey. I was made to connect. I can see the signal reaching for me. But now I can push back." She placed both hands on the interface, and for a moment, her eyes glowed gold again. The tracking signal on the screen flickered, sputtered, then vanished. The message changed. "Target lost, signal jammed." Jaren let out a slow breath. "You just scrambled the system." Ava leaned back, tired but smiling softly. "I'm not theirs anymore." The stars outside grew brighter as the pod entered open space. The planet behind them now looked small and cold, a place of cages, scars, and silence. But ahead, freedom. Ava curled up in her seat, resting her head against the side. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not walking away." Jaren looked over at her. "You saved me too, Ava, maybe more than you know." She closed her eyes, not to escape, but to rest. This time, her sleep was deep. No tears, no nightmares. Just dreams of stars, of a life finally beginning. And as the pod flew into the vast unknown, there were no chains, no brands, no cages. Only a girl who was never meant to survive. Now finally free to live.